Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Matrupena Samstita Namastasye 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 Namo Namaha. Our salutations again and again to that Mother Goddess who abides in all beings in the form of the Mother. So on this Thursday, I'm taking advantage of the fact that for many of our devotees, they are celebrating or started to celebrate the Navratri, that is 9 nights, which is specifically dedicated to the worship of God as a mother. And I thought the topic should be Mother's Grace. So I would like to explore what is grace and what we mean by the mother, and then conjointly what we mean by the Mother's grace. Firstly, grace is a flowing entity, something like a river, something like an abundance. When we look at the typical idea of what is evolution or an unfolding of nature, where more and more complexity is delivered, is unfolded, we can imagine that it is something from inside that is expressing itself lovingly outside. And this is why we often say that nature is our mother. We say Mother Earth, Mother Nature, and it is a wonderfully traditional thing to think that this grace that is flowing is something like a mother's love. After all, if you were to choose a father's grace or love and a mother's, of course, naturally you'd want both, but the mother's is much more nurturing. The mother's is all giving. And it is to be emphasized in this day according to the prophet of the modern age, Sri Ramakrishna, whose every breath seems to indicate the significance and importance of thinking of God as a mother. He, in fact, endorses it as the highest form of worship, a superior form of worship. Now, of course, in most ancient times, more or less everybody in every culture thought of the author or the source of all kind of creation and all natural phenomena in a feminine way. Goddesses of fertility are to be found more or less in every culture. And when we look at the modern, what has now become the modern celebrations in religious practices worldwide, we can see there's a common trend. It is associated with the annual seasons. And the annual seasons bring us not only diversity in crops, not only reflect the agricultural seasons, and therefore the expression again of Mother Nature, but they also express our moods. This is the autumn season. I take it normally that in Ireland the autumn begins in September, October, November, and then the winter starts December, like that. I think at schools they're told that the autumn begins something like, August. But in practice, we don't see that. The autumn season is a transition period, in the northern hemisphere anyway, of the summer and the winter. And in Ireland, the ancient Celtic tradition of Samhain is there, where we say goodbye to the ghosts of the past, the kind of souls which we wish well, but may not be so well. And we look forward to looking after all the souls, so all souls and all saints, happens around about that same time because it's a Christianized version of the idea that we are entering into a wintry period. stalks are fine, but also visually, the leaves start turning brown. And there is a certain beauty, unsurpassable beauty, that we call autumn. It's even more pronounced in a country like India, where the autumn season, known as Sharad, is regarded, in fact, as one of the best seasons in India. The sun has started its southward journey, and the sun's blazing rays, which we love so much in absentia, they begin to slant. You must have noticed how the days are now much shorter. And the whole subcontinent, anyway, of India feels a freedom from what is there an oppressive heat of the summer, a kind of wonderful relief. In those countries, the monsoon has infused new life into trees and shrubs and creepers and so on. And so it is natural to turn our attention to the Mother Earth, the Earth Goddess, who shows off her richly embroidered green apparel of lush vegetation everywhere. But regardless of whether you are there in this tropical subcontinent, or whether you are just somewhere in the northern hemisphere, or in its due season on the opposite side of the world, the seasons are entirely opposite. Whatever it is to catch that seasonal mood and to see the divinity within it. It behoves us to take every opportunity we possibly can, based on our annual experience of the seasons, the agricultural conditions which are there, and to see where is God in all of this. Our philosophy tells us that there is only that one existence that is expressed in a dynamic form. And in the language of the tantric systems, we are reliant on this projection of this Shakti. The wonderful work by Shankaracharya of Sundari Lahari will say in his very first stanza, Shiva Shaktya Yukto Yadi Bhavati Shaktaha Prabhavitum Nached Evam Devo Na Karu Kushalaha Spanditum Api. Only if the junction with Shakti herself, that is, the feminine power that we also call nature, would Shiva, that is, that entity that remains unmoving, earn the privilege to become overlord. Otherwise, the god is not able even to stir, because Brahman, which is Shiva, doesn't do anything. It remains. The dynamic aspect of it in the tantric system is called Shakti. While so, how dares one who has acquired no merit either to salute or to praise thee, O goddess, who art worthy of being adored even by Harihara, Virincha, and others. So we can see how Sri Shankaracharya himself writes this beautiful poem, the Sundari Lahari, in honor of the Mother Goddess, and provides us with many mantras suitable for meditation and also practical use in getting various things that we want. It's a wonderful textbook, if anybody is in trouble, to identify a particular mantra that will assist somebody in any circumstance whatsoever, by the use of yantras, diagrams, and mantras. So the worship of the Divine Mother is there in every system, and it is being revived. In the Christian tradition, there is the Marian movement, and although theologically Christians don't really wish to identify the Mother of God with God himself, Still, in practice, the Marian movements elevate the Mother Mary, the Queen of Heaven, to a divine goddess status. I think this is an unconscious movement that is natural throughout the world. This worship of the Divine Mother is certainly one of the oldest forms of worship known to humanity. Even in prehistoric times, this worship goes on as Mother all over the world. And Swami Vivekananda's wonderful final conclusion commentary from the last chapter of Patanjali Yoga Sutras is so beautiful, it is worth reading again and again. He says that at the end of the evolution, nature's task is done. This unselfish task and sorry, I'm going to interrupt myself because I see Charles has made a commentary there. He says, today is a great Marian holy day, coincidentally. How wonderful. Our Lady of the Rosary, hope everything is all right, and so on. So that is a wonderful information. And so that illustrates what I was saying about the Marian movement that has been there for centuries and centuries. Anyway, Swami Vivekananda has this to say: nature's task is done. Is done meaning that the task of unfolding, the task of developing all the variations and species, and we can go from the cosmological point of view, all the galaxies and gases and stars, and on our own biological basis, every plant, every species. There's such great variety that works in such great harmony. We call this ecology, that if one element is upset, it upsets the entire nature. So nature's task is done. What task? The unselfish task which our sweet nurse, nature as a sweet nurse, not just a mother, but also a nourishing mother, had imposed upon herself. She gently took the self-forgetting soul by the hand, as it were, and showed him all the experiences in the universe. That, as we see, is the dynamic projection, the dynamic expression of the Supreme. All manifestations bringing him higher and higher through various bodies, till his lost glory came back and he remembered his own nature. Then the kind mother went back the same way she came for others who also have lost their way in the trackless desert of life. And thus is she working without beginning and without end. And thus, through pleasure and pain, through good and evil, the infinite river of souls is flowing into the ocean of perfection, of self-realization. He ends off by saying, "Glory unto those who have realized their own nature. May their blessings be on us all." It is really only, though, in India that we find not only surviving mother worship, but we see it elevated to exclusive supreme heights. Mother worship has gone way beyond the framework of a mere sect or a cult and become a fully fledged living religion, supported by advanced theology, independent scriptures. We note particularly the Chandi, or the Devi Mahatmyam, and rites and customs and festivals that we are experiencing now. And they are followed, of course, by millions of people in these modern times. In Bengal itself, the worship of God has attained, and that is in the form of mother, the highest form of cultural refinement and ritualistic sophistication, and in fact has become the dominant faith practiced by those people. Sri Ramakrishna used to say very directly, very poignantly, and we have to take it very seriously in a practical way, to look upon God as mother is the purest and highest form of spiritual practice. I'll repeat it. To look upon God as mother is the purest and highest form of spiritual practice. Why did he say that? It's because mother's love is the most unselfish and the most unconditioned form of human love. For a child, mother is all sufficient apart from giving birth. She provides everything that the child needs. She provides nourishment, she provides protection, warmth, comfort, training, education. So to look upon God as a mother is to make God all sufficient in one's life. It's a very natural, intimate, and purest form of relationship. And we can see why the validity is there in the Christian world. Because a father might be an entity that punishes. So we can see how the Abrahamic tradition, possibly of an image of a jealous and punishing God, would not be suitable in many cases. And it gives us the opportunity also to allow ourselves to relax and be carried by the flow of the divine grace, something like a river flowing. And if you're in a river, there are two options. I would say they are swimming and drowning. But swimming, of course, is to make yourself buoyant, to give yourself enough faith to allow a kind of floating. When you're swimming and you're tired, you are sure that the water itself is buoyant enough to carry you. If you want to learn the art of swimming, learn the art of floating first, the art of surrender and being carried. That takes a lot of pressure away from a person in this modern world and day and age. But worship of God as mother has prevailed, of course, in India from these prehistoric times. Even probably in the Indus Saraswati civilizations, we'll find it. Certainly in the Rig Veda, there's a wonderful hymn which is known as the Devi Suktam, and it is also chanted during these few days, which we can characterize in Bengal as the Durga Puja days. The Divine Mother declares that she moves with the Rudras. Rudras, when combined, is called Shiva. The Vasus, those that penetrate everywhere, in combination we can call this Vishnu. And the Adityas, those beings that we see as the 12 months of the year, that is the very existence of time itself, and all the other manifested illuminating factors, commonly called gods, goddesses, and so on. That she is the very power of all these factors, and she is the queen of the world, and so on. All of this is mentioned. But of course, it is in the more modern Devi Mahatmyam that I've mentioned, which is part of the Markandeya Purana, that her full glory comes out. And those of you not familiar with that, I would suggest that you get a copy and see if you can tune into this very, very special celebration. Don't take it as a cultural difficulty. Try to understand the deep meaning and possible feeling and devotion that can come from this. Of course, it is centered around various mythological stories. But the whole purpose and meaning of mythological stories is to portray something that has a vastly deeper meaning. For devotees of the Divine Mother, especially in such areas within India, Bengal, Kerala, parts of Tamil Nadu, this book, this text, otherwise known as the Chandi, is regarded as the most sacred and valued scripture. We estimate it was composed around about maybe the 6th or 9th centuries of this current era. And of course, there's another authoritative book, which is called the Devi Bhagavatam, composed maybe a little later. And they all came into existence with the development of the tantric system, the emphasis on this motherhood of God. Worship of the Divine Mother is really, though, present and prevalent in the whole of India. And we have to say that it was Swami Vivekananda going to the southern tip of India and crossing shark-infested waters where the Arabian Sea, the Bengali Sea, and the Indian Ocean meet. And there, at the very bottom of India, is Kanyakumari, that is dedicated to the mother as an innocent and pure virgin goddess. There is hardly any real large area in India which doesn't have a temple dedicated to God as a mother. And even the great heroes of the past, such as Rama, worshipped the mother Durga, particularly before killing Ravana. Shivaji, the great Maratha king, was a votary of Bhavani. And even the Sikh founder, or the Sikh guru, I should say, Guru Gobind Singh, who was the 10th guru of the Sikhs, he is also said to have worshipped Mother Durga. What does this Durga mean? Well, Durga means a fortress, and therefore is portrayed with every conceivable weapon you can think of, because all the weapons of the deities, according to the story, go to her in order to defeat the deleterious elements in the universe, those that are causing disharmony and disruption to peace. This is restored by divine intervention. What a loving mother does this, but also an energetic mother is the mother that is doing everything. If you look at the game of chess, you'll see this exemplified. The queen is one part who is omnipresent. She can move anywhere she likes on the chessboard, but the king can't move at all. This is Shiva Shakti. And so there are, of course, different forms of the Divine Mother, which are there available for meditation. But let us know that we are always protected. Our own Divine Mother, Sharada Devi, said, "Always remember you have a mother." Such wonderful, comforting words where we can give a faith and a surety to our life. During the early centuries of this era, the Divine Mother was worshipped as an independent, supreme deity. And of course, she was pictured as Simhavahini, that is, sitting on a lion, riding a lion. And that's the image of Durga that we find in this text of the Chandi, where she appears as Chamundeshwari and Mahishasura Mardini, the conqueror of that great demon. But of course, in later centuries, the Divine Mother has come to be regarded as the wife or the spouse or the dynamic aspect of Shiva. And here again, we have two possible schools of thought. The first school, the Divine Mother and Shiva are regarded as equal in power. That's called the Samya school. It's the more common in South India. But in the other school, known as Kaula, the Divine Mother as Kali is regarded as the dynamic principle, and Shiva is the passive principle. Both of these are valid. And of course, that latter school is most prevalent in Bengal, also Kashmir and Kerala. 10 great forms are worshipped during this period of time. And it is good for anybody of any cultural background to reflect on these various aspects. They are Kali, Tara, Tripura Sundari, Bhuvaneshwari, Bhairavi, Chin and Himastama, Dhumavati, Bagalamukhi, and of course Saraswati. Swami Vivekananda had wanted to install this Durga Puja, and he felt that the most valid way of doing it was to take the living goddess being the Holy Mother Sharada Devi. Part of the Durga Puja would be to have some animal sacrifice, but it was Mother's request that said, no, please, I request that you don't do this. When Swami Vivekananda had decided to celebrate the Durga Puja at the Belur Math, he first sought the approval of Holy Mother herself. And she was staying at that time in Bagh Bazaar in Kolkata. And so Swami Premananda went to the mother and she wholeheartedly approved the proposal. But on the Shashti day, she came with other women devotees and stayed at what was Nilamba Babu's garden house nearby. If you're ever going to Belur Math, this to me is one of the most sacred places you can go to, and yet is a little hidden. It's outside the compound of the Belur Math and fairly recently acquired and maintained. The mother attended what was called the awakening ceremony. Awakening ceremony means that all the deities are asleep during the dark half of the year, if you will, where the sun goes along its wintry course and becomes awake. So she has to be awakened at this period of time and invited to come down and participate. This is part of the standard puja way of understanding things, that the deity is infused, as it were, with divinity. And of course, since sannyasins, as part of their vows, cannot undertake any kind of ritualistic worship like this, Swami Vivekananda decreed that the puja should be done in the name of the Holy Mother herself. And then that became a tradition which continues to this day. So how does Swami Vivekananda look on Sharada Devi? He looks on her as the divine counterpart of Sri Ramakrishna, born for the awakening of womanhood in the modern world. In a letter to Mahapurush Maharaj, Swami Shivananda, in 1894, Swami Vivekananda writes to him from America and giving expression to his conviction about the divinity of Holy Mother. He writes like this: "Brother, I shall show you how to worship the living Durga, and then only shall I be worthy of my name. I shall be relieved when you have purchased a plot of land and established there the living Durga, the mother, that is Sri Sharada Devi. The presence of the Holy Mother, the living Durga, during the puja must surely have given boundless joy and satisfaction to Swami Vivekananda and other disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. And we know that she had attended in 1912 and also in 1916 and perhaps many other years also." So this celebration is centered around a wonderful blend of mythological stories that we can follow, reflecting on them, finding out their deep mystical meaning, and allowing it to bring us closer in our feeling to God as a divine mother. Whether we view this in the form of the Holy Mother or Our Lady of the Rosary or any other form of the Divine Mother. I'll tell you something quite personal. When I was born, my father was inspired to take me as a small infant and dedicate me to the mother. And so I personally have a great affinity to God as a mother. We can explore some of the various stories. I don't think I'll go into them. You can explore them for yourselves. But they're all really expressed so well in a devotional form, which is contained in this Chandi, this Devi Mahatmyam. It's divided into three basic parts. In the first part, we see her as Mahamaya. That is, and her aspect of stillness, quietude, potentiality. It's described as Yoga Nidra of Vishnu. That is, before the all-pervading entity pervades everywhere, a quiescence is there, a kind of silence before a dynamic eruption that we see as our world, our creation. So this is Mahamaya. It's the power of this inertia, which makes people, of course, feel physically lethargic, indolent, sleepy on the mental level, have lack of interest. But under the influence of this cosmic delusive power, the Lord Vishnu, Vishnu means the one that pervades everywhere, went to sleep. That's the mythology of it. We can easily find the philosophical truth about it. So at that time, when things are not being attentive, there are two demons, Madhu, Kaitup, and they actually are born out of the ears of Vishnu, because we don't need a separate anti-God in this theology. And they attack Brahma, the creator God, because they are struggling, a struggling force against the force of creativity. Brahma then praised the Divine Mother as Mahamaya or Yoga Nidra. And pleased with the petition, she withdrew herself from Vishnu's body. Vishnu now woke up, and this awakening itself is responsible for killing these two deleterious elements. Madhu, that is, the honey, the sweetness of pleasure. Lust and greed, we can put it as. And then, of course, the body of the story goes to the slayer of Mahishasura Mardini, that is the slayer of this great Ashura, this great demon, and is also called, of course, called Chandika. The story, if we want to follow it, goes that when a powerful demon, that is Mahishasura, coming in the form of a buffalo, was the king of the demons, that is the negative forces of adharma. They attacked those who were dedicated to dharma, the forces of light, and vanquished them. The defeated gods went to Shiva and Vishnu and complained about the atrocities of Mahishasura. And hearing this, Vishnu and Shiva and other presiding deities became angry. So there is justified anger when things go wrong. There's a feeling that things should be rectified and justified, and this gets consolidated and combined into a form of supremely powerful and dazzling brightness in a female form. And this is the Devi that comes out. She is known also as Chandika, Ambika, and so on. The dazzling brightness of this Devi. With this, Mahishasura first sends an army to attack her, and the whole of the Chandi is really, in this section anyway, to do with the battle that takes place. We might think of this as a kind of bloodthirsty thing until we see all the various cartoons set out in the modern world And we see that this pales in comparison, but it also tells us the truth. It tells us that life as such is not all smooth, is not all plain sailing, is not all light and sunshine. There's also darkness and evil there. And we have to acknowledge it for what it is. But to maintain our level-headedness, equilibrium, and balance is what we need to do. And we are charged with all the weapons that are there given to this Devi, because they are really hers, namely concentration, discrimination, fortitude, love, strength, goodness, beauty, harmony. All of this is contained within us. These become weapons against our key enemy, and the enemy is really the mind. It is our own mind that is our enemy. We can raise ourselves by ourselves, lower ourselves by ourselves. We are our best friend or our worst enemy. This is in reference to the Bhagavad Gita. So with this, we have the opportunity, just in summary, of several things. Firstly, reflecting on the motherliness of God and putting ourselves therefore in a position of a child that allows ourselves to be loved and cared for and carried with a great, great faith, with nothing more to rely on except the mother's nurturing aspect. Secondly, it gives us the chance for ourselves to be loving and motherly to others. It gives ourselves a chance to have some deep feeling and to regard all women as manifestations of this divine motherliness, this universal goddess. And so during this period of time, it's giving us a great, great opportunity. I think also for Christians, the opportunity arises in May, because May is the month of Mary also. It's to take every kind of form presented to us in the material world and to see if we can transform it into a spiritual experience so that there's an internal transformation using all the material that we have available to us on the one side and using our own sense of fortitude on the other. And with these small words about the Mother's grace, we finish off. Om Shanti, 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 peace, peace, peace be unto all. May that motherly goddess protect us all as her immortal children.
Om